Well, good afternoon, friends. Good afternoon. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying a little bit of last bit of October here. We go before we get into the even colder weather there, and we have a wonderful guest joining us today on Conversations with Dune Friends. And my name is Dune Nguyen, and we have Jane Halford joining us today. So pull up a chair, grab a coffee or tea, and join the conversation. Join the conversations through the comment section of Facebook there of this live video. And but before we have Jane come in and talk with us for an hour and a bit here, let me do a quick introduction of Jane's background so you know who it is that you're hearing from. Jane Halford is driven to help organizations and leaders achieve their goals. By leveraging her experience as an entrepreneur, a board member, a chartered accountant, a CEO, and her passion for leadership development, Jane brings a breadth of experience to individuals and teams that she works with. She is passionate about her own professional development as well, and she is an active participant in programs led by Brendon Burchard, John Maxwell, Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, Darren Hardy, and Stu McLaren. Now, through her business, Halford Consulting, Jane serves organizations through a range of services focused on leadership and governance transition through in-person and virtual training, advisory services, and professional speaking. Jane is an active board member of Farm Credit Canada, chair, Alpha Phenomics, chair, and Sawridge Groups of Company. And during the pandemic, Jane has developed a new no-cost and low-cost virtual content to help organizations welcoming new leaders this year. On October 21st, 2020, Jane, that was just today, Jane's latest course, Leadership Transition During Global Crisis, was launched. Now, join us as we discuss leadership transitions and many wonderful topics. Everybody, help me in welcoming our guest today, Jane Halford. Jane, how are you doing today, my friend? Welcome, welcome. How are you?
I'm so excited to be here, Dune. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and to the audience that's watching us.
Wonderful. And we have an hour and a bit, and we're going to discuss all things leadership and all things transitions. And but before we get into all of that, Jane, tell us a little bit about your background. What got you here, my friend? Wonderful bio, but maybe fill us in a little bit, expand on it a little bit.
Well, maybe like a lot of people, you started in one career path and then you realized that you were heading somewhere else. So one of the things that I started at is being an accountant, and I realized that I didn't love it and I probably wasn't very good at it either. So in about 2005, I left that profession and I actually became a regulator, which is kind of funny because really, you know, regulators and accountants are all serious professions. And in 2012, I was in fact on a stage moderating a panel, and inside of my head, some things kept saying, well, you know, remember when your job was this fun, you know, wouldn't it be more fun to do these kinds of things? And so I just knew that I had this calling to do something else, but I didn't know what it was. And I'm sure in the course of the next hour, I'll tell you a little bit more about the context around that decision, but left my job in 2013 with no plan. And I gave myself the luxury of 6 months to figure out the what's next. And so that led me to be an entrepreneur and focused on leadership transition, and happy to share the rest of that story over our time together.
You bet. Wonderful. Wonderful. So with that background introduction, let's get right into the present time. I mean, we're all facing COVID. We're all working through it. We all impacted in some way, shape, or form. Tell us a little bit about what your day or what your week looks like during COVID time here. And yeah, just maybe we'll start there.
You know, I have to admit that I had been on the road for most of January, February, and so at the beginning of March, I came down with sort of a traveler's cold. And so when the pandemic started breaking, I realized that people would be very afraid of me, even though I had total confidence that I was just having a cold. So I stayed home, and I was kind of moping around, feeling a bit sad about life. And I decided the next morning when I woke up, everything was going to be different for me, and I was going to find a way to switch the whole business over to virtual. And so that morning I woke up and I'm like, what do I have to learn? And I knew nothing about Zoom. I had online courses already, but I wanted to make sure that I could transition both my community and my clients into a virtual space. And so that became the journey of being absolutely obsessed with all things virtual. And so maybe a lot of people have done that, but I have to say, I became a total geek, and I love it. Other than, I swear, the view that you see right now on this camera is the view that everybody's seen for the last few months. So I think it's time to switch up the scenery. But anyways, I'm loving it and having some fun with it, even though it's a tough time for everybody.
Yeah, you bet. You know, you gotta live in the present, and this, love it or hate it, is our present. And with this new world that we're experiencing, there are things that we must focus on that were maybe different than before. There are things that we must get good at. And sounds like you roll up your sleeves and got into some of the geeky stuff and really just embrace technology and see what you can do with it. That's great.
And I think some of it was the sheer desperation to realize that when you run your own business and you employ people, and some of my people are staff and some of them are contractors, if I didn't get it right and we didn't have a business, those folks would also not have income. So felt a real obligation. I called March the month of hustle. Hustle, make sure there was work. Hustle, make sure I had sales in the stream. And then it became sort of the April-May period was delivery months, because I was so thankful for clients who decided to continue with me and to take new adventures. And we were able to sustain the business. In fact, we're starting to grow, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you for sharing that, what you've been up to. And tell us about the launch of your, the big thing yesterday. And I think we have a video clip to share as well. But tell us about that exciting event yesterday.
You know, throughout the whole pandemic, I kept thinking, you know, what can I do to contribute to society in a way that matters to them? So you saw lots of people offering free services on LinkedIn and things like that. And I knew that if I got out of my area of expertise, I wasn't going to be helpful. So the thing that kept rolling around in my head, and especially in the spring months, was what can I do with leadership transition? And so the course actually became inspired from that. What we did was we filmed it live in July at a studio, MTech studio here in Edmonton. And we sent that out so at no cost, so people could access it right away. And then the content that we shared yesterday was the professional recording of that. So our goal is to get it out broadly, North American, beyond if we can, because leadership transition is such a point of failure for organizations and for great people that I think this course and the content and the things we'll talk about today can really help transform people, even at this time of crisis, even within all the dynamics they're dealing with in their organizations. And with small tools and confidence to do it, we can make a big difference. Yeah,
yeah. I would love to perhaps play this short clip here. It's about 2 minutes. Tell us about this clip where it's a video on MP4 that I'm just going to bring in here. And so give me a second to do that. Do you know the clip I'm referring to, Jane? Let me just bring it in here.
I think so.
So here it is. And I'm going to just bring it in here and tell us about this clip that we're about to experience here.
So this is actually part of the course itself. And so this was an excerpt that we had wanting to explain to people what leadership transition was, because it's not a term we often use. You hear people talk about CEO succession or leadership succession. And so I wanted to give people a relatable way to think about what transition is. So that's what this video is all about.
All right. Well, I'm going to press play here. Let me know if you can hear the sound.
We've all been on the high school track program, or we've watched on the Olympics. But if you could think about a 4x100 relay race, you can picture that in your mind, can't you? So now let's walk through that. So there's a track team, and they go out and they practice, and they're all competing to run in the Olympics. Well, the actual training of that whole track team is actually equivalent to succession planning. You want to have a whole bunch of runners at a whole bunch of different levels that are going to be ready at different times. But then the race is coming, so you have to pick your final four. So picking your runners is the same as executive search and selection. So now you have your team. You can put names on them. You can put them out to the public. And now it's game day. It's race day. It's the Olympic moment. And what happens in that race? The first runner's in the blocks, nervously waiting for the gun to go. And then bang, they are off as fast as possible, running, running, running. And you know what they run to? All the way through the transition zone at full speed. They don't slow down until they hit the end of their leg. And if you remember what the second runner does, they actually line up at the beginning of the transition zone and they run as fast as they can. So by the time they're in the end of the transition zone, they're at full speed. This is the same thing that's happening in organizations. And this is what we've really been talking about this week. It's that transition zone where one leader is running full out to the end, the other one is running slower and then full out at the beginning. And then what happens next? You got it. It's the handover. One hand to another, passing that baton. But you know what happens, right? So many times in that big moment, the baton drops. And dropping the baton in leadership transition is the 40% failure rate we've been talking about through this whole series. There is no place for baton dropping in the middle of a global crisis. So we need to make sure that handover, that moment of the laying of the baton in the next leader's hands, is secure, it's safe, and it's fast.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing what is actually part of the course. So yeah, revealing a bit of some content from there. And tell us a bit more about the course. How long is it? How long does a person take to go through it? Any details on that?
Well, I know my audience is super busy people who don't have time to spend online. They also just have shorter attention spans because they have a lot of pressure. So the course is divided up into 6 videos. Each video is less than 15 minutes. And then there's some practical tools that they can use, or they can share both the videos and the tools with their team. So the idea, if you just had 15 minutes to pay attention to this, you know, whether that's per day, per week, per month, at least you could make a big difference. So people can.
Oh, the internet has played trick on us. Jane, hopefully you'll be able to come right back here. And let me just show you some more of what Jane wanted to share with you while she's making her way back through the internet there. And one of the things that I wanted to maybe bring up is really the website that is available out there for you to access and whatnot. So let me just go ahead and bring it up here while Jane is trying to come back in through the vast internet of things there. And in terms of the website, it's just halford.co. So www, if you want to type that in or not, that's an optional piece. But I'm just going to bring up the website here, and we can look a little bit into that. There it is. And let's just make it a little bit bigger. So on her website, she has, of course, videos that you can check out. You can certainly look into the training programs and book her to speak at your event, or perhaps some coaching and consulting and those kinds of services. But I have met Jane through the speaking community, what's called the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, of which we're both members. And really, in the speaking kind of arena, we're certainly very much affected by COVID and all the things that you can imagine. But we're, as you heard from Jane earlier in the broadcast, we're certainly trying to figure out our way through this remote and web kind of delivery style. And so hopefully, again, Jane is able to join us again here online, and she can continue the conversation. But, earlier she spoke about a company that does the training video and whatnot for her. And certainly the, MTech Digital is quite a good company who have really worked with a lot of speakers in the Edmonton area, as well as Calgary and so on. So it's just a quick shout out to David Papp of MTech Digital. I see that Jane is back here from the Internet of Things. So can you hear me in the green room there, Jane? You bet. So let's have Jane continue her discussion from before here, folks. We're just on your website here, Jane. Tell us a bit more about your website. I'm going to just take my video out here. So if a person was to go onto your website, what kinds of things might they see on there?
Yeah, I really wanted to provide a range of opportunities for people. So the resources tab there is the free resources. There's some there. There's also some on our YouTube channel. So people just want to know a little bit more about leadership transition, or if they're, don't have any budget for doing more, I wanted to make sure that they had information there. And then the online courses and community there are just giving people the opportunity to, have low cost type of engagements. And then the custom part is really if we want to tailor something directly to their needs, because I know every organization has different budgets. We have, different kinds of contexts. Some people are starting to go back to in-person. Some people want to do all online. So happy to have a conversation, because at the end of the day, the services have to meet people's needs, and so I'd like to meet them where they are rather than how I think I would like to package them. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, wonderful. Thank you for talking a little bit about that. And folks, if you wanted to find out more, it's just so her last name, halford.co. And so I'm just going to put that on the screen here so that people can see it easily. But tell us a bit more about when you work with people when it comes to leadership transition, what is one of the kind of typical stumbling block or roadblock or issue that people run into during leadership transition?
One of the things that has been well studied across North America is that people spend a lot of time and energy in hiring their new leaders. So leader can be the CEO, or it can be actually anybody in the organizations, including frontline staff. And we spend all of our energy getting ready for that person's first day. The people get tired, and so by the time they get to the first day, they've actually forgotten to be able to go back and say, well, how are we going to orient them? So it's more than the basic briefing about the office. It's all of those unspoken things, because we've all been the new person on the job, right? And it's like the year later where we reflect and say, oh, I wish somebody would have told me. That's exactly what gap I'm trying to bridge, is to say, why don't we pull those things forward into day one, week one, month one, so that they can hit the ground running. So when I work with people, it's really helping them discover that they already know the content to help their new leader succeed, but they're just not thinking about how to package it in a way that would actually get that information in front of them sooner. So that's the exciting part, is that people have the skills to do this. They just don't know that it should be done, and they don't know how to do it in a way that's time efficient given everything else in their plate.
In other words, you spoke just now to a concept that I encounter quite often, and that's the idea of people tend to know what to do, but oftentimes the problem is they don't do it at the right time. So timing is everything. So how can we, push up the timing of some of these activities? It's one of those pay me now or pay me later kind of thing. And we in the consulting business, sometimes we have this joke that says, people never seem to have enough time to do it right, but we always make time to do it over and over and over.
It's so true. And, I do get calls from people, and I'm happy to respond to them. Typically, it's like it's a Friday afternoon and they have a new leader coming in on Monday, and they're saying, hey, what should we do to get ready? I will respond to that, absolutely. But it would be better to actually back it up and say, when there's somebody leaving, is actually the time to start planning for the next person's arrival. And I think people don't realize that, because what they find is that they're waiting to know who the next person is and see that biography. And you don't have to wait. There's so much about the information that a new leader needs that you can actually start planning that and organizing it before you have that biography. And then when you get the biography, you can tailor it down. So it's actually not a bad thing to start planning early on, because it actually makes it safe to have the conversation, because nobody's judging whether they like the new leader or they don't, or whether they know them or they don't. And so it actually creates more of a project team around it, rather than reacting in some way that, it just puts pressure on all of the other daily tasks people have. So spreading the work out is more effective. But if you have to do it, even in an emergency, even in COVID right now, right? If your leader comes down with COVID, hopefully it's a temporary handover of a role, but we should be ready for all of that, especially in a world like we're living through today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So almost like an active and certainly preemptive and certainly active, proactive, and in some ways you can even extend it to the in what you just spoke about. Really, almost like uh, business continuity or emergency planning, whereby the leader is not even moving on yet. There's just no sign of that, but you know that things could happen. Do you have some key information, some key things put away somewhere so that it can be sort of pull out? You can think about any kind of our prime minister. They probably have plans that says, if the prime minister is sick and can't fulfill his duty for an undetermined amount of time, there's probably ways that they would kick in someone else. Obviously, so we appreciate that about larger and more complex organizations like Canada or the United States. But in smaller organizations, perhaps we can benefit from some of that as well, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I challenge people to do, and for your audience that's listening, you can do this today, tomorrow, next week at your organization, is figure out who those most critical roles are. And just say to them, we're going to have 15 minutes, whether it's virtually or in person, and let's pretend that you have to hand over your job 10 days from now. So it's not that you don't come back to work. It's just you have an unrealistic timeline to hand over everything you know. So what is the most important things? Who would know them? Where would you send somebody new? And we can plan that in case of emergency. But then if somebody actually, gets promoted or decides to retire, that there's another circumstance, we can pull that document out. But I love doing that when an unreasonable time frame, like you have 15 minutes to plan a handover, that's 10 days from now. But it helps people realize that they do know an awful lot. And then it gives them the tools to say, in an emergency, pull out this document. But in a planned scenario, we're going to keep extending that and flushing it out further. So easy job for anybody to do if they want to have some fun with their team.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you. So, so often we're so busy with our kind of current responsibilities to give it a lot of time and effort, but I can see the power in it. I can see the power. I can actually also see the benefit of having been through that. You probably have a different understanding of your role a little bit when you think about it from that perspective, right? I mean, every day we do our role in the way that we sort of always evolve to. But to be thinking about that probably also deliver some insights. Have you seen that where through the leadership transition that you do, that the current leader actually have some new insights into their own role as well, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens every time. And what I love about, especially leaders are going into career retirement, they're so experienced, they're so knowledgeable, and things that they do in their organizations, that's kind of like their secret sauce. They actually don't know really why they do that or how they do that. And so in the leadership transition, when we give them sort of different buckets to put their knowledge in, they start to realize that maybe nobody else knows that. And so it becomes a bit of a legacy opportunity for them to share the things that just don't have words around them. So everybody can hand over the technical aspects of their role, but when the leader can share history or context or just even how they do things. Like you can think about it in any job. Like who do you turn to when you don't know what to do? Or who influences people in your organization for the positive and who influences for the negative? So what if we actually got that out of that leader's mind so that the new leader can say, oh, wait a minute, I start to realize how things tick around here. And then they become like they're geniuses because they actually just flow into the system rather than fighting the system, or everybody's sitting back and waiting for them to discover it themselves.
So again, it's kind of like, again, you say that one of my favorite words, and that is context. When I do a lot of corporate training and even university teaching for continuing education, one of the things I love to say is that context before content, and oftentimes, people have all kinds of content, but lacking that context, it is misguided or it is not tapped into. So I can imagine that during a leadership transitioning the context and the interpretation of the context and, who's who, and as you mentioned, who are the go-to people, those kinds of contexts are much more important to get out early on than the nitty-gritty technical details of something. Yeah.
And even more important now in the middle of this global crisis, and we talk about this in the program, is those things that feel like challenges today because of the pandemic. So whether it's supply chain or safety of people or economic uncertainty, whatever that is for your organization, why don't we be very purposeful to say all of these challenges are in fact opportunities for your leader to figure out who in the organization knows about these pieces and have those people step forward. So for example, if there is supply chain disruption, who is the supply chain expert in the business and how are they going to work side by side with that new leader? So there's all kinds of opportunities in every part of the challenges that we're facing today, but we have to be able to change our mindsets and look for the opportunities.
You know, what you said just now triggered my mind about essentially looking at high level risk, and then when and if it does happen, what actions would we take? Who would we go to? And would they be aware of their role in that? And just, again, just a high level kind of planning. And I have a photo here that I'm going to bring in, and I'd love for you to maybe speak to it a little bit. And the photo that I have is this one here. Tell us about this and what it means to you. And yeah.
This is similar to the relay race in the sense of, when you get a leader, a new person in the organization, it's like strapping them into this rocket and sending them off. And so the analogy I like to think about is that, the astronauts' journey to command the International Space Station. So if we think about it as a whole journey, so NASA or SpaceX has a whole bunch of astronauts that are hoping to be selected for a mission. So that's succession planning. So we have lots of astronauts. Then we eventually pick the team to go on the spacecraft, and we appoint one of them the new commander. So it's that appointment of the new commander, which is naming the new person into a role. And then we put that person on there and we launch them into this crazy, fast, intense, especially now, journey to the International Space Station. And if you're that person, you are having all kinds of doubts of whether you can do the job, or what's it going to be like when I get there? Are people going to accept me? What if we have a critical issue come up? Am I going to be okay? And then when they arrive at the space station, you have to remember that they are the commander that's coming in, but there is a full commander of that space station. So they're not the boss yet. And so they have to have that handover period, just like the baton pass, to say to the current commander, what do I need to know? And have that full briefing. And if you can think about the space context, there's all kinds of formal lines of authority. So it's very, very clear that there is only one boss. But in our organizations, it also gets very confused as to who's the boss. There's only ever one commander. There's only ever one boss. And so it gets to be that time where the command changes. And in the space station, one commander steps down, the other one is given formal authority. So that's the changeover date. And then the other piece, which is often overlooked, which is maybe some of the things I've been most surprised at in this journey for me on leadership transition, is the outgoing commander. So they hand over everything, they board that return vehicle, and they head back home. And they're excited about getting back home. And then they land, and remember what happens to astronauts when they land? All the gravity hits them, and they feel weak. And they are suddenly now not looking at Earth, they're actually in Earth. And all of those things that they looked forward to just feel very, golf and grandchildren don't fuel their fuel tank in the way that their jobs used to. And so really trying to make sure that whole journey from being appointed to a role to taking command to retiring is honored, because if we don't honor the human journey here, then we actually disempower the leadership transition, because it's those human beings that have to hand over command. They have to tell the story. But we often in the corporate world don't talk about the human story, but it actually puts the human story and the actual technical parts of the handover back together. So that's a long story for that spaceship.
I love it. Love it. So again, the whole idea is that this transition, like I often say in my corporate training, I say, what we call transitional period, even though it's very short, is very mission critical. And the way I say it is, you've been on a flight that is, let's say, 16, 20 hours and whatnot, and you get, first class meal, you look at all the features that flight sort of afforded you. And then there's this few seconds of, landing. Now, landing is a transition. You transition from being in the air to being on the ground. And it's a very brief moment in time. It's not like hours and hours trying to land, hopefully. It is, a number of seconds or whatever, or maybe a minute or whatever. And so, however, short that period is, it's you can't do it over. Like once the plane is on the ground, it's on the ground. You got to deal with the outcome of that. So any transition like that, and particularly a leadership transition, is kind of like that, where it's a very definitive timeline. And once the plane is on the ground, you got to deal with the outcomes of that. And so I think it's, a lot of people don't give it the attention and time and effort just because it's such a brief time.
And it applies to volunteer roles.
Yeah. So I'm sure Jane will come right back here. Some technology issues on her side. When we do this, we're at the mercy of a lot of different components, the least of which is the big internet that's sort of out there. And so I'm sure that Jane is finding her way back here. But let's just kind of enjoy that view there. Thank you, Jane. I see you coming in here. And as long as you... as soon as I can confirm that you can see and hear me, we'll have you back in here, my friend. So that's a wonderful, wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that.
It's great to be back. I don't know, the internet gremlins have me today.
No worries. That's just a great demonstration of the kinds of things we have to deal with when we work remotely, right? Sometimes it works great. The technology, when it works great, is fantastic. And then once in a while, it doesn't cooperate, right?
Well, Dune, I think you have a photo that looks like a conference center or something with a big screen in the background. It's probably really relevant to that one there. This is kind of like life, just like we're experiencing now, how we're working today and how nimble we all have to be, right? So this is really to speak to the point. It's almost like every day is this grand adventure for us. And so whether, it's this Facebook Live that kind of has at the mercy of technology, but this is an example of an in-person retreat that I hosted. And every in-person retreat I've done since the middle of August have had this exact same scenario where we get the call the day of or the day before with a participant that says, I have cold-like symptoms and I have to go for a COVID test. I've been exposed to COVID, or in one case, a lady had a baby and she wanted to participate. And so we ad hoc this crazy system to have the people on Zoom, the audio there, you'll see the speakers are on the chairs, the microphones in the middle of the table. And I've said to a lot of clients, like, this is the kinds of things we need to be talking about in our workplaces is, so when we have that phone call that somebody can't attend in person, let's adapt. Either let's go all virtual or hybrid like this. And it feels in some ways frustrating because we can just curse that, this is the world we're living in. But in some ways, it's kind of fun. I feel like for those people that are old enough to remember MacGyver, like this is the digital MacGyver, right? Where we have to figure out how to piece this together. So I found this kind of humorous because I thought, like, could you imagine a year ago that I would look like a professional facilitator with this kind of crazy setup? But that's how it goes. So I think for anybody in any organization, it's that ability to laugh at the troubles that we're having, but then patchwork something together. I'm sure, Dune, you're the same way in your business. I think it's one of those moments in our history that I think the more open we are and the more we look to each other for help and for troubleshooting, the better off we're going to be. The other feature that I wanted to say on this video or this photo is the power of virtual. And I think that's one of the things we talk about in the course, but also just experiencing is that as much as maybe some of us are quite tired of online meetings, there are elements of the online meeting which is empowering or even making it a bit more equal. One of the things that I have found with groups where there's a clear hierarchy in the organization is that when you put everybody on Zoom or Teams or whatever platform and everybody's the same size of a box, everybody's equal. And And you think about all the things that that virtual space takes away. It takes away any kind of body image issues. Because honestly, like you can only see me from the shoulders up. So am I tall or short? Am I skinny or not skinny? Do I have arms and legs even? Like we don't even know. And so it actually is very freeing for people. And it also neutralizes the hierarchy. So for an open conversation, a different kind of conversation. So I encourage people to not always curse the online platforms. And let's just say maybe there is some advantages that you can't get in person because of the human dynamic of sight and judgment of people and all those other things that we do as pack animals. So it's just a challenge.
Absolutely. When some of our senses are being blocked, we develop more sort of awareness of other senses. I have friends who are blind, and because he's blind, his sense of hearing and his sense of many other senses are increased over time because they learn to develop those, right? So to be out of the traditional quote unquote office environment, we have to develop some other senses. And one of the things that people tell me is that when you are online, you actually notice kind of facial gestures and whatnot more than if you were in person, interestingly enough, because, you know, the person's right there and it's just like, so, I mean, there's different dynamics for sure. This is, I see Courtyard Marriott here, and very cool and fun and interesting. And as you say, MacGyver setup. Tell us about, so this is related to the previous photo there, another sort of in that series there. But I'm going to go back here, and you've done a lot of personal development. And for those of us who are in that space, have that interest, we know who this fellow is. But tell us more.
So this is Brendon Brouchard, and I met Brendon Brouchard. Well, I didn't meet him in person, but I saw him at a conference in 2017, and I actually went to the conference to see Peter Diamandis and Les Brown as public speakers. They're two people I just wanted to see in my lifetime. Yeah. And a guy like Les Brown, who's such an amazing public speaker, to me, got outshadowed by this guy, Brendon Brouchard. And I kept thinking like, oh my God, who is this guy? So for those of you who don't know Brendon Brouchard, he's like one of the most followed personal development, high performance people on YouTube. He has tons of free content on YouTube, but he really does equip people that are in the expertise business or have things that they want to share online through their businesses, help you package it, help you get it out there, but also have the right mindset. So he's very grounded in psychology, both the psychology of the presenter and the course content, but also the psychology of the marketing. So really fascinating, learned a lot from him, taken a ton of courses from him. And it's been interesting to watch him reposition his business in the middle of the pandemic. So I mentioned at the beginning of our session that the new course was filmed live in the studio and also professionally recorded, as you saw in the clip. That whole approach to designing and building a course is Brendon Burchard model. I'm sure other people have that model. Sure. But one of the things that I discovered, and it's interesting for other people in the audience, is that I was part of the way through that live recording week, and I started to have doubts, like lots of entrepreneurs do, thinking, I'm not sure my audience, being mostly executives and board members, are actually on social media. Like they have social media accounts, but they're often handled by communications people. So they're not the real human beings behind that. And I decided I was going to finish the program as Brendon had laid out. But then on that same Friday, I actually had the chance to be on a video call with Brendon, and he took my question. And I asked him the question. I said, you know, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is my audience. And I was doing your 7-day live launch approach. And I was having doubts that my audience is not going to be in social media that way. And he said, you're absolutely right. They're not there. And I kept thinking, oh my God, I just spent like a week doing this. And I wish I would have known. But actually, to his credit, I said, well, how would you reach this audience? And he gave me some really practical ideas. But now that we've actually launched the course and we've put it out there in a more mainstream way, all of that effort, all of that doubt that I was having in July is now gone because we have the professional recording. So I would have to say it's an example of try something new in 2020. Don't give up, and something good will come from it. But it's almost like a gift when you open it and you're a big surprise inside. So I think the surprise is still coming on this one.
Absolutely. And if I could add, sometimes you are surprised on who actually finds your product or your whatever you put together, who they find valuable and how they find valuable. One of our jobs is to put something that we believe is valuable out there, and then let the world decide how it's going to use it. Because there's so many successful products that have the story of, we didn't realize our consumers or our users were going to use it that way. But you know, you won't know until you release it. You won't know until you put it out there, right?
And in this world that's changing so fast, like, you can't hold back to be perfect. And I think that goes across everything everybody does, is that you actually have to risk it and sort of be a little bit uncertain when you go out to market and let people receive it. Because what I've learned along this experiment journey of 2020 is nobody's out there wishing for you to fail. So even when we did the filming, and that picture is fantastic, it's like, this is the studio all of this was filmed in. And when we did the first day of the live filming, we had technical trouble. So you can test everything just like we did today, Dune, and we test and test and test, and you go live and it didn't go live. And then we started to like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Because some people were there in chat, but they couldn't see us. And so we kind of had to make that up. And then I got a bunch of feedback from some good friends that evening saying, your video quality was terrible. Even the sound was good. And so we had to readjust everything for day 2 and 3. And so what was really shocking is that, first of all, we made it through and my team was amazing. They were troubleshooting, and you can imagine in a live wired studio where you're filming, like the whole course was filmed in like continuous loop. So there was no takes in this one. So I knew my job was to focus on getting the professional recording done. And my team's job was to deal with everything else that was going around me. And so it was just such a great moment for all of us to make that team win and to be able to say, all I knew was that I was to talk to the main camera, and I could see them seamlessly going around, and they were trying to troubleshoot. And just comparing stories afterwards was quite funny. So I would say that the experiment was a team sport, and we loved it.
Yeah. Well, you know, any pioneer would have a similar story. You can go back as far as, any pioneers who are doing something, amidst uncertainty, new environment, new technology, new methods and whatnot. We're going to encounter that. And so the key is, how do we adapt on the fly, as well as how do we learn from it so that next time it'd be better as well. So I'm just wanting to display it in larger size here for our viewers. So was this at MTech as well there? Yeah,
it is. It is. And one of the things that people always say to me when they see that it's filmed in professional studio, or they see the final product, is like, that must be super expensive. And I think as an entrepreneur, you're always trying to figure out, where do you invest your dollars? What I have learned by seeing the professional quality of the final product is that I can't recreate that. I tried to film, in my own house. It requires a whole bunch of investment in cameras and lights and audio. And then somebody's going to have to edit this. And so from a cost per minute of effort, the studio has transformed our business. Like, I won't film anywhere else like that. So sometimes I call MTech up and say, hey, you guys have 2 hours of studio time, and I'm just going to come in and record small clips. And we do that. And I'm just always so happy with it. So I think that for people who are trying to figure out how do they get their message to the market, don't underestimate the power of a local studio, because what I particularly love, like, the video quality is great, but the sound quality is stunning as well. And so I think the combination of that really helps me deliver better to the people I'm trying to meet. So I would say, don't try to always do it by yourself. Like, if you're going to choose where to spend money, just be purposeful and explore that. But Dune, you probably felt the same way in your business, trying to make sure that you use your time to the best impact. And I think that's true for everybody.
Yeah. Now, I agree with what you said there. And I see David in the shot here. This is David Papp. And David Papp is wonderful. And in fact, he's a fellow CAPS member as well. And was the president of CAPS Edmonton. And so we know him well through that. But MTech Digital, let me just put on the screen here for everybody. Don't know if I got the capitalization correct, but I believe that is the correct name there. So MTech Digital, and of course, David Papp is a friend there, and he has a great, fantastic team there, and they do wonderful work.
Absolutely. And if I end up getting into the podcast business, I might have to go check out his studio for that too. And then that's the tricky thing about it. Any of us trying to share our messages is like, where do you spend your time? And I feel like for my own strengths, verbally telling the story or verbally sharing tools seems to be better for me than being an author. And so it's just a matter of, I've chosen the video side of it, but you know, podcast might be it as well. And so I think always just trying to stay open to avenues to convey what you want to share with the world. And for some of them, just say, well, maybe that's not my channel, but maybe I could partner with somebody else who does. So just like we're doing today, like I'm not sure I'm going to start to do Facebook Lives, but you never know. It's great to have a good experience with you.
You bet. Well, thank you for, again, taking time to join us here in the busy schedule that you undoubtedly have. And so moving from MTech Digital and moving from this whole professional video and audio production and all that kind of stuff, I really appreciate what you said just now about how you have figured out that writing a book or writing a whatever it is actually not your best sort of way of approaching things. That in fact, live presentation that's recorded and whatnot, more video and things like that are more your preference. And so some people don't discover that until much later on in their journey, right?
Yeah, if you told me I had to write a book by Christmas time, like I'm sure I could. Like I have the content, but I don't. It doesn't fill me with joy right now. Maybe someday it will. But some people, you know, would dread being on video or live audio or whatever, and so that's fine. Everybody's got their strengths.
Yeah, you bet. So let's switch gear a little bit and thinking about. I'm going to go really generic here. So beyond transitions. What are your thoughts on leadership in general? Just if we sort of focus on the topic of leadership, are there some thoughts that is top of mind that you can share with our viewers about the challenge of leadership or the wisdom of leadership? Anything to share there?
Yeah, I think my overall comment is people underestimate their ability to influence for good. So whether that's in their family, in their community, in their place of worship, in their business, wherever it is. And I think that the more conscious people can say is, who am I? What do I bring to the table as far as strengths and interests? And how can I bring those out more? Right. And I think if people did that as individuals, our world would actually transform quite a bit. Because I think what happens is that as individuals, we got caught in, you know, our roles, whether that's your job role or, you know, a family role. And you kind of forget that unique quality that's just you. So I think bringing that out for yourself, but then also once you start to realize that that does have bigger impact for the world is bringing it out in others. And I think that's where this idea of, you know, helping empower people, helping others lift others, you know, the world is actually very abundant, and that if we can help each other grow and be better and contribute more, we don't have to worry about less and less and less. And I think, you know, overall, you know, we can look across the globe, across, you know, politics, social interests, economy, companies, scandals. Like we clearly have a leadership deficit. But if we don't have role models that we can aspire to be, then we have to be them ourselves and lead in our tiny little communities and then spread out over time. Because I think we're not going to get the future world leaders that we need if we don't start demonstrating that ourselves and mentoring the next generations and challenging ourselves to be better, because we can be better. I am just an internal optimist on that, but I just love when people discover the power of their own best strengths.
Well, that's wonderful. And, you know, as you said, a couple of things that I want to maybe put a spotlight on. I interpreted what you said to mean that, you know, we need to bring more of ourselves to our work. That's one of my favorite sentiment to share with people, is that I watch people and, you know, you see them in their community at home and they would be a certain way. And then they come to the office and they almost like turn into the other mode. And you know, my advice for them, if they were to seek it from me, is to say, just bring more of yourself into everywhere you go, really. But so that's one sort of thought. And the other thought is that we are, like you said, more powerful than we realize, more influential than we realize. So just again, find ways to really leverage your whole being, right? And I always say to people, your job, your career is much bigger than your job, and your life is much bigger than your career. So bring your life into it. Bring your life into it. That's how you can influence everything, right?
Yeah, and I experienced that in my own career. I think in other jobs that I held, I felt like the expectation of that job was to be a certain way, dress a certain way, behave a certain way, and I don't know where I got those ideas from. Maybe they were mentored, maybe they were, institutional culture, whatever it is. And when I look back, I really regret that I didn't bring more of me, because it's now much, much later and I'm out of those roles where I think I could have done more if I had been more my authentic self. But, when you have those expectations, you just don't know whether they'll be accepted. And I think we are all kind of worried about not being accepted. And so we hold back. And it's that holding back that actually, takes away the power of each person, but the power of the group as well.
Tell us a little bit about this page here. I'm at the, of course, this is the page for the course, and you can check out and fill in your name and hit submit and be able to get the course right away, I presume, Jane? Tell us
absolutely. This is the registration page. If you would love to have you in the course, and this is how you get into it. You're right, instant access. The videos are there. The downloadable resources are there. And I think the important thing about the course is, as much as it's packaged for the current reality, the content here, the approaches, the downloads, they would apply to any transition in any year. So it's not just that, if you don't have a crisis transition going on right now, there is also other content there. If people are looking for more core content, there's another course there called the Board's Role in Leadership Transition, really targeted at board members. And those board members have a really important job when they bring a new CEO into the workplace. So it may be that this course is the right one, maybe the other one. But at the end of the day, I'm always happy to answer people's questions. So if people want to email me at info@halford.co, I'd be happy to respond to them. So I think that my most important work is yet to come, and being part of the community and the dialogue around leadership transition is what matters most to me.
Wonderful. Now, I'm just sharing your other page that you referred to there. And I also just wanted to bring it that email address, info@halford.co. So there it is. And tell us, you have a couple here. And if I scroll down, obviously more are coming, because seems like you have found what you enjoy and really good at in terms of this particular kind of format and whatnot. So we're expecting more from you, right? In terms of training courses and more on leadership and more on transition.
Yep, and that's experimenting, and sometimes we get custom clients that want certain things, and they turn into courses that are more general. So, for example, during the pandemic, I was teaching a course for people who saw their next steps being a CEO. And so we had that course. And so probably in January, you'll see that come to life on the site, is to say, if you're looking at 2021 being a year where you're going to compete to become a CEO, what are the things that you would need to get ready for your own transition into that role? Because it's a very different kind of role. So as much as you have career experience and expertise, being the leader is going to take a different mindset. So what can you do before you actually get the job? So that's an exciting one. Yeah. And the other one that we're working on right now is for interim leaders. So people that are going to lead an organization on a temporary basis. So that it could be because of an illness or a termination or something else. And there's a unique journey for interim leaders, unique challenges, but also unique opportunities. And so we've taken academic research and turned that into a program to help people when they're in that temporary handover situation for any reason. So there's lots there. I nerd out on this stuff all the time, and I'm excited to try to think through how we can help more organizations.
There you go. Exciting. For the first one, you could consider titles such as CEO Boot Camp.
Exactly.
And you can bring in some boot camp kind of stuff into that as well. So wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Switching gear yet again. we're gonna go way back. Okay, we're gonna go way back. We're gonna go outside. Yeah, outside of your professional focus these days. We're gonna go back to, you mentioned that you were well, I mean, you spent some time on a farm and in rural communities and whatnot. Tell us about maybe a story or two from that, and tell us what are the kinds of things you learned from that experience. Again, we're going way back now.
Well, not as far back as you might think. So I grew up in the city, and I fell in love with a farmer about 20 years ago. And so suddenly found myself learning things that kids who grew up on the farm already knew: how to drive a tractor, how to move animals around, kind of like the life and death on a farm, seasons and weather, and all this stuff that I think as a city kid, you just kind of know are out there, but it doesn't really matter. And I remember when we first met, my other half said to me, well, where does meat come from? And I said, well, obviously it comes from the grocery store. He's like, well, how does it get there? And I was so embarrassed. Like, I'm not sure I really knew what the whole system was. Like, you know, it was on the farm and then it was on my plate and the rest was kind of gray, right? Yeah. And so what I realized, and that's going back 20 years, is that I, as a city person, didn't really appreciate the food chain and how our country, how our cities get fed. And so that's part of my passion now on the agriculture side, is helping translate for city people like me to say, you know, where does food come from? And there's a great Canadian food story, safe food, available food. And I think the pandemic has really helped emphasize that. I mean, I think all of us were a bit horrified to go into stores at certain points and realize our favorite products either weren't there or that they may not be coming. And so, you know, whether we ran out of flour, you know, toilet paper is a different story, but flour, meat, vegetables, you know, I think people started to realize that we're not as safe as we wanted to think. However, over the duration of the pandemic, you know, Canadians who shop at grocery stores didn't go without. And so that's where I get really proud in the agriculture world, is to say we are doing a great job. We are not telling our story well locally because people like me didn't know. And we're certainly not telling our story as well as we could be internationally, because Canada is just outstanding for food safety. And it is truly one of our distinctive advantages. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I have another video that I'd like to share. It's What is Leadership Transitioned? It's a highlight reel. Maybe speak to that a bit before I bring it on screen here, Jane.
Yeah, I think really trying to get to that point that people can do this. We do not have to be afraid of new leaders. You already know what to do, and you can take advantage of your teams, you can take advantage of your history, and you can turn it into action. So that's really what this video is all about.
Do you want me to play from the beginning or from about 28 seconds in or so?
Whatever you want to do. We'll give you the power.
Well, if you're going to give me the power, I'm going to play the whole thing. How's that?
Okay, sounds great.
Here is the whole thing coming on here. And let me just go ahead and do that. And let me know if you can hear the sound when I start playing.
Let's do it. 40% is the failure rate of new CEOs after 18 months on the job, according to Fortune magazine. Think about that. That's unacceptable in our society today. But the worst thing is that 40% is the same failure rate that North America has had for more than 15 years. That's a lot of great leaders, great organizations, and great intentions, and an epic failure rate. By learning how to transition leaders well, we can change that rate. Together, I'm going to teach you how. So what is the key in helping a new leader succeed? If we think about it, there's many things we can teach them, but start with the basics. Start with the context and culture. Start with the history of the organization. Think about who your stakeholders are, your history, who your network is, and what it will make a difference in this CEO's life. All of those are relevant, and all of those are things you can pass forward. By mobilizing all those people, two things happen. One, the chance of missing something significant in transition is decreased significantly. And second of all, the people around that leader are empowered and become advocates for that new leader's success. What I know is if you take what I've said tonight, you will make a huge difference in the life of your next leader. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That's another one with, what is it, MTech Digital, as well as David Papp there at the helm of that.
Absolutely. And you know how that video starts out, the 40% failure rate. And I talk a lot about this in the course. That was the statistic in North America for the past 15 years, that 40% of new leaders fail. And so that's a terrible statistic. That's unacceptable. That's really what drives the business. But if it was 40% in normal times, there's no way we're going to succeed at that kind of rate in 2020 or 21. That's really where I thought I had to advocate to say we've got to do better, because our organizations can't afford a leadership failure right now. I think nobody can afford that loss of momentum. So I actually want the companies, the organizations to feel like we're actually not only going to beat that 40%, we're going to do it in the times where the rate is probably much higher than that.
I'm going to bring in another video here, and this is board's relationship with the new CEO. Tell us a bit about that.
So this is a bit of an excerpt from the other course, the board's role in leadership transition, but the idea that, you know, when a board welcomes a new leader, they can redefine the board and the CEO's relationship with each other. And it's just like any other new person coming into any role. Look for the opportunities, look for things you want to redefine, and then go after them. So that's what this is going to speak to.
Well, let's take a listen and a watch here.
Team. A change in CEO creates a natural opportunity for the board to change its relationship with its only employee. In other words, it creates the opportunity to define the relationship both parties really want for the future. I hope you have a healthy relationship with your current CEO, but in some organizations, the relationship gets strained. It can take many forms, including being directly adversarial. A strained relationship can be demonstrated through minimal contact between the board and the CEO, or conflict between the board chair and the CEO. In the worst cases, I've seen bullying and manipulation of the board by the CEO or the board chair to the CEO. If a difficult CEO-board relationship is your current reality, this is the most important section, because your board has a high chance of repeating that same behavior, even if your new leader is collaborative and approachable. You've had to adapt to your current reality, so you need to be very purposeful in your new approach to your new leader. So regardless of the relationship you have today, take a few minutes with the Go team, or even better, your whole board, to openly identify the type of relationship you want with your new CEO. Always phrase things in the positive, like proactive communication, respectful discussion, transparency, collaboration. If you need some inspiration, just search the internet for descriptors of healthy board CEO relationships. There's many, many resources online. And if you haven't hired your CEO yet, this list can inform the interview questions, the candidate evaluation process, and even reference checking. And even more important, this list can help you and your new CEO exchange views on what all parties want from the relationship.
Wonderful. So,
and that's a video that's on our YouTube site. So, you know, free resource. And I think this is the kind of things that I'm really excited to share with people, is that, you know, just even to have that thought piece in a couple minutes that says, oh, wait a minute, maybe we are caught in a mindset that our relationship with our CEO has to be a certain way. And, you know I talked in that video about, you know, toxic relationships or strained relationships between boards and CEOs.
So tell us more, a little bit about, I think we lost the tail end of your kind of story about how you got into it. So maybe if we can pick up on that and start over on that particular sharing, that would be great.
Sounds good. So when I left my role in 2013, you know, a whole bunch of context around that, but I was actually only given 10 days to hand over 7 years of a CEO's role. So when I spoke earlier about the 10-day challenge, that's informed from my life experience, because how can you take 7 years and hand it over? And in my case, I handed over to an internal person. So at least she understood the organization, but it was unrealistic because she also had a job. And so completely unreasonable. So when I finally got out of all career things and trying to figure out the what's next, I kept thinking that I had become incompetent in handing over things, because when I arrived in my CEO role, it wasn't really handed to me in any organized way. I now left, and I had left a big mess, and I realized that I had been on boards where we had hired new CEOs, and I also hadn't supported them. So I thought I was just, a hot mess, and I didn't know how to deal with this. And then along the journey, met my co-founder that we founded a business with. And the reason we founded the business was that we had seen those statistics around the 40% failure rate and the well-proven problem. But we had looked across North America and found out that the only people supporting leadership transition were doing it from an executive coaching perspective of the new leader. So laying all of the responsibilities of that success on the new person rather than activating the system. So that's really where the business came from. We decided to build a solution to a problem that people know that the problem exists, that people fail, but hard time believing that you can actually fix it proactively. So that's really what inspired us, was take this world problem and change it. Yes, it's not, a global issue that people will care deeply about, like the environment or health and well-being. But at the same time, for those organizations and those leaders, it truly matters to get it right.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, the whole idea is you are working from your own experience, having been on the challenge side of that and having felt the pain and realized the magnitude of the problem. You're there not only motivated to be part of the solution, but also very much guided by, again, you know how it felt. You know firsthand how it felt.
Absolutely. And one of the other pieces we haven't talked about so far is part of the leading up to the 2012 decision was that I was actually bullied in my role. So as the head of the organization. And so people don't understand that in our organizations that can happen. And so earlier in that year, I had disclosed that to the board, and they did the right thing. They helped me find people to support and help me understand what was going on, help them as well. But we got to a crossroads that fall, which was the same time I was on that stage, where I realized that they also had become victims of the same bully. So now my advocates were no longer there. And so I had to choose to say, I'm going to live in this unhealthy environment, or I'm going to choose to be unemployed with no plan. And unemployed with no plan was a better alternative. But I do like to share that context, because people always say, well, it takes a lot of courage to admit that. Well, it's actually my way of getting back at people that bully other people, is because I'm going to inform people that it happens and say there are resources and it's not acceptable. And if you feel alone, like, just start talking about it, start reaching out, and you will find the support system that will help you out with that. But it's a hard reality to know that it still happens. But I think the more we can share, and going back to our conversation about your authentic leadership, that's part of my authentic leadership story, is that that happened to me, and that I had to learn what to do about it, and then earn my way to sort of peace of mind in a different reality.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And it's a bit of a vulnerable place to be, to experience that and to share it again. But I guess the main point is that when you help people with that problem, you do have some real insight into, again, how they feel, and you walk the mile in their shoes already.
Yeah. And it helps me have a lot of empathy for, the strain on leaders. Like, you never know what's going on for somebody. I never let on to my team that was going on. I mean, in the end, they knew that it was, but you start to bear the burden of all of that. And that's the part about being a leader that we don't talk about, is like what do you take on your shoulders? And do you have enough support system to carry that load? Or do you need to find another way to find supporters, and, that whole dilemma about what's appropriate and what's not. So that's I'd rather have an open conversation about that in our society, so that leaders can feel like they don't have to carry it alone, and that they don't have to deal with the mental health challenges that come with that. And we are seeing a lot of that stress in our current environment as well.
Yeah. In other words, again, it can be lonely at the top, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. And you have to just know, who are the right people to help you. And sometimes people are, specific circumstances. Like, I remember hiring specific executive coaches to help me. And then who's there for the long term. So that's more on the personal development journey, and having those trusted advisors or confidants, people that have good words of wisdom, but won't tell you what to do or won't judge you for making different choices. And so there's probably only a handful of those people in any leader's life, but you have to know that you have them.
Yeah, you bet. Wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to maybe just go a slightly different direction here. And that is to ask you the question of, do you think that leadership transition applies to lower level roles within the organization? I know you focus on CEOs, but what about middle managers? What about supervisors? Are there similar things that apply to that transition?
Absolutely. Any role, any organization, any size, volunteer or paid, it's all that same idea of being purposeful in what does new person need to know. And many years ago now, I actually designed a transition program for frontline telephone salespeople. And so I have now a huge respect for how hard that job is, but really tapping into the rock stars of that organization and those telephone salespeople and saying, what are you doing that is creating success, or how are you overcoming the challenges of this role? So it backed them all the way up to say, do we hire differently because we now know the kinds of people who succeed? But most importantly, when we hire these great people, how do we make sure that they're trained? And in their cases, it's even the first week. Like by the time they make their first telephone sales call, they needed to know a whole bunch of things. And so the end result was after they put that program in, there was less turnover of those frontline people. And so that's what made me really believe that the concepts are the same. The challenges and the specifics of the job may vary greatly, but it's that being very intentional about helping new people.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you shared a little bit about your background being on the farm and the lessons you learned there. We're just having a bit of fun here by me asking. Obviously, a lot of your experience that you are applying to this role of helping people with leadership transition comes from your, CEO experience and board experience and studying others and learning and all those kinds of things. I'm just curious, were there lessons you learned from the farm that is applicable to leadership transition, my friend?
Well,
just stretching you a little bit.
I will edit the language on this one, but the one thing I realized was that when you're on the farm and an animal poops on you, you can wash it off. But when you're in an organization and something poops on you, it's a little bit more complicated. Yeah. So I have to remember that when things get difficult in the organizational setting, we just realize that, okay, that's a bit of a mess. Let's be calm. Let's wash it off. Let's move forward. And so there's always twists and turns on these things with leadership transitions. There's, these circumstances where, the outgoing leader wasn't told about important things, but it was just because everybody knew that somebody else was telling them and then nobody did. So you hopefully have a whole bunch of small things that come up, but you have to just be calm and settle everything down and then move forward. And, same with working with animals or equipment or anything else, or even our experience on technology today, just be calm. Let's find a solution and then let's pick it back up.
There you go. It's not rocket science, although we have a lot of beautiful rocket photos.
Exactly.
No, I'm just kidding. So as we round the corner on wrapping up this conversation, Jane, are there areas that you want to discuss that we haven't gotten into, or topics, or people can check out your website as well as your YouTube channel there, and you're also on Facebook and many other platforms, Twitter and whatever, your social media stuff. But they can kind of learn more through there and watch your videos, some of which are free on the web there. But tell us a little bit more about any area that we haven't gotten to yet.
I think that the one thing that is really weighing on my mind here is just, how do we help society get back to feeling good about itself? Like, we have all had our different pandemic experiences, and some much more traumatic than others. But I'm worried for society. I'm worried for people, family, friends, people I don't know, about how do we gain our confidence back? And so I think that, I have a real passion for mental wellness and supporting each other. And I think that because we've all suffered in our various ways this year, it's not that there's one person that's riding high to lift others. It's everybody's like had a bit of a drop. And so how do we help elevate each other, and how do we help support each other? And so I think that that's one piece that I would like to encourage the audience to think about is, how do we take care of our mental health ourselves? How do we watch for others, and how do we start to lift each other and build our confidence? Because just even going out in the world feels scary now for a lot of people. And as the pandemic runs on, or even if it's over at some point, you know, how are we going to get back to seeing family and friends, or feeling comfortable in rooms, or those kinds of pieces? And until that's reality, how do we keep ourselves okay? Because we still, at the end of the day, we have family, we have friends, we have coworkers that are really counting on us. And so you have to put your own oxygen mask on first, and then you got to help others. So that's one piece that I just feel really strongly about, Dune.
You bet. So again, it's the be part of the solution, folks. Be part of the solution. Things are tough enough as is without some of us wanting to be part of the problem. And we just have to be, you know, again, discernible and apply discernment in, you know, what is the solution? What could be part of a solution?
And if you're not okay, which many people aren't right now, is actually to say it. So say it to somebody, you know, reach out for professional help, talk to family and friends about it, but don't do this alone. Like, everybody is hurting in their own way. And so if you're just having a rough moment, or a rough month, or a rough year, and you feel like you're alone and you can't handle this pain, just start talking, and don't stop talking. If somebody's not listening, you go to the next person, and don't give up, or call the helplines. Like, there's just so many ways that you can feel society wrap around you. So I just encourage people to just keep talking.
There you go. Wonderful. And I just wanted to maybe just have these photos sort of flash by here as we kind of sum it up. And, you know, you covered a lot today in the time that we had, whether it's the MacGyver technology solution to try and reach the appropriate people during COVID, whether it's the rocket and how it is, you know, very fast paced, these leadership transitions, and we have to really plan for it, and we have to be proactive. And, you know, a whole lesson about working with professionals, in this case, professional videographers, to be able to deliver your course in a professional way. And also you talk about learning from experts. You put your time and money learning from folks like Brendon Burchard. And I must say, you're the first person I know of who actually had a one-on-one conversation video call that you said with Brendon. I mean, like, he's famous, right? And I love the stuff that he's doing and he has been doing. And, you know, you listen to his story. He didn't start out that way. Nobody started out that way. You know, Facebook didn't start out that way. Google didn't start out that way. They always evolve from something small and, you know, passionate. They are passionate about it. And over the long haul, they developed into something. And it's very refreshing to see that you're willing to put your time and money where your passion is. And that's leadership development and personal development. And so tell us a bit more about, you know, your whole investment in learning. Maybe just expand on that a little bit.
You know, it became, well, when I saw Brendon Brouchard on the stage, it was at a time in my life that I wasn't feeling good about a whole bunch of things. And the thing that he said from the stage that stuck with me and really spoke to me that day was, what if you could feel 10 times healthier than you do right now? And he wasn't necessarily talking only about like your physical body. It was like your mental health. But when you think about 10 times healthier, you actually can't picture that. I still can't today when I think about that. And then he said, but if you don't do anything to try to get healthier mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, you are going to stuck from where you are. So what if 10 times is actually possible? And so what it really kind of, because I was in a harder place in my life, and because of that question, I started to reach out. I got an executive coach, started to invest very purposeful time. I made a goal to spend 30 minutes a day listening or reading something that was developmental. And it didn't have to be hardcore content. It could be YouTube videos. It could be TED Talks. It could be magazines. It's just like something to fuel my brain. And then I found speakers and authors that spoke to me at various times. And so I've always been very open to who's coming into my life next. And so you'll see the list of different people. Brendon Burchard was an early one. Darren Hardy, very different style, very different message. John Maxwell, same sort of thing. And every voice that I follow, I felt like I've picked up parts of that. So I kind of become a hybrid of all of it. But I think for the entrepreneurs in the audience, where I found the most comfort in those voices was in those days that I was tired and I felt alone. And I felt like the progress wasn't going to be there. And I could put on audiobooks or TED Talks or YouTube videos, and I could hear these voices of people like Brendon Brouchard or Darren Hardy saying, the entrepreneur's journey is complicated. You're going to have highs and lows. And it made me feel normal. It made me feel like I was going to overcome this because other people have. And so I found that as a source of inspiration. And so in the middle of the pandemic, when you find yourself locked down, I felt like self-development was the thing that brightened my days and weeks because, television was bad. There was nowhere to go, those kinds of things. But I could once again hear the voices. So that was something that's really been an important part to me, is to always welcome in those new thinking pieces. Keep what serves you, park what doesn't, or throw it out, but always just kind of always shopping for what's inspiring to me or what's helping me be a better human being.
That is fantastic. I really enjoyed the journey that you've just shared. And again, it underscores the idea of, you have to be self-aware. And oftentimes people who are at the high level after they've been at what I'm going to say somewhat rock bottom, somewhat, of a low point, that gives them empathy, and it also gives them awareness of, how far they come, and also how things could be, right? Whereas if you just have it all sort of good and just awesome all of the time and never experience the low points, perhaps you may not be able to appreciate or empathize with somebody else who's in that spot, right? So thank you for sharing that low point as well, as now you have a really bright future ahead of you with all of these different things. And may I say that you've used COVID time wisely, in the sense of, again, developing yourself, developing your products, developing your offerings and all those things. And I was a little surprised to hear that you just roll up your sleeve and got into all the technical things and quite enjoy it, as you said, nerd it out, right? So that's a journey that can be very fruitful as well.
Absolutely. And you take the times that you've been given and try to make the best of it, and, be the best person you can be. And everybody has off days, but, the sun always rises. I mean, it was one of those things that probably the most, memorable thing in the last month is that I sadly lost my dog of 10 years. I had to put her down a couple weeks ago. And that was a really sad moment and an important moment. It helped me reflect over our life together. It helped me think about, what role she had in my life. And then I remember the next morning, it was the most beautiful sunrise. And I thought, and the sun rises again. And it's one of those things that in the darkness of COVID or going into winter and feeling overwhelmed, the sun will rise again tomorrow, and that we just need to live in the moment, and to life's journeys will be up and down, and that's okay, but we're not alone, and nothing's really permanent.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, I'm going to turn things over to you in just a moment to wrap this up and to take us home here. And if you happen to be a singer and want to sing us a song, feel free to sing us a song. If you happen to be a poet and want to sort of cite a poem just from top of mind, feel free to do that. If you happen to, prefer speaking, go ahead and say some things that would resonate with our viewers out there. But folks, thank you for tuning in live here on this hour and a bit here with Jane Halford, and thank you as well for to those who tune into the recorded version as well. If you leave a comment in the comment section, we'll definitely get Jane to respond to your comments and questions. But so till we meet again, folks, have a wonderful rest of your day, and take good care of yourself, take good care of one another. So with that, Jane, I'm going to turn the steering wheel over to you. You take us home however you like. Sing us 3 songs if you like. We got time.
Well, I've been told from many people who care for me very deeply that singing is not my forte. In fact, some people are more afraid of public speaking than death. I'm more afraid of public singing than anything, so I'm going to spare myself. But Dune, I just say it into words, and I just want to thank you very much for you sharing your gift with the world and for me to be a part of this journey today. Please keep doing what you're doing because you have an important message and you have an important place in the community. And so please keep bringing us together and inspiring us. And for the audience, 2020 has been difficult. 21 is yet to be written, but let's just keep moving forward one moment at a time, one day at a time. Let's help each other out and we will get through this. And in fact, we may even find out that we're individually better and our families and friends are more supported and our community has come to a different place of leadership and of life and appreciation. So let's go out to the end of 2020 with hope, and let's go into 2021 feeling a lot more empowered. So Dune, I'll leave it at that for today.
Wonderful. Again, thank you so much, Jane.